So now guys, we are still in power analysis topic, and now I will give you an answer for each of these situation, each of these market conditions where all of these shown two loops. All right, all of these shown two loop, and what we are trying to do is that we try to analyze power of each pattern. All right, if each pattern either it has power or have no power up. Right, now we go to the first pattern. All right, we go to the first pattern. Now we want to see either it has power or not. All right, either it has power or not. Now you could see that. All right, I like to use yellow for this one because it is more clearer, and see that for the first pattern this. All right, so what can you see from this pattern is that from the eye observation, definitely, right, definitely. Okay, now this is a demand line, this is supply line, and this is demand line number 2, this is supply line number 2. So what we can see here is that the seller for the loop number 1 is higher. All right, it's become aggressive, if more aggressive than the demand line number 1. Thus the seller in loop number 1 is more dominant. Now by time this changes, right, when you look at the second loop, we can see that the demand line is longer than the seller line or the supply line. So what it tells us, right, what it tells us is that this loop number 1 has changed from seller dominant to buyer dominant. All right, that's what it tells us. All right, and from this, from observation, we can say that this line has at least has power up, and when we say has power up, has high chance to go higher than previous high. Okay, and all right, and when it doing the retracement here, this is where we want to get ourselves into some position in this equity. All right, so it goes to second situation, second scenario where, all right, where second situation where the demand line and the supply line goes beyond the demand line, it goes up, right, it goes right. Now we can see that, all right, this is one line, same, right, and when we analyze this loop, all right, this is demand line number 1, this is supply line number 1, this is demand line number 2, and this is supply line number 2. All right, and what we can see is that for the loop number 1, the seller is aggressive. All right, the seller is aggressive compared to it buyer, so we can say the seller is more dominant. But for the second loop, now is quite special. All right, now you can guess what is happening now, and either this second loop have power or not for the upside potential. Right, can you guess, does it has power or not? As we can see that the demand line goes up to a certain level, and the supply line or the seller goes back to the origin point of the demand line, right? And what we can say here is that now we can see that there is improvement of seller. Am I right? Improvement of seller if we compare this both loop. All right, we can see that the seller become less aggressive. All right, now, and there is improvement of in terms of buyer and seller. Previously, we can see obviously the seller is more dominant, but now we see that both buyer and seller are equal. So for this case, we are saying that this line, can you guess? Right? Actually, this line, right? We can conclude that this line has, after it reverse upward, right? That's the stock market behavior, that we go down and up. When it goes up, it has high potential to go higher than previous high. All right, because we can see that by time loop number 1 and 2 it makes improvements. So after it retraces, it has high chance to go higher than previous high. And this is proven if we do the mathematical approach. All right, this is proven to be, if you take an example of any numbers of both demand and supply line, you can see that by time it will yield a result that loop number 2 produce a greater numbers than loop number 1. All right, then hence it shows that after it will reverse. When it reverse, it has high chance to go higher than previous high. That's mean this loop has power. All right, this is scenario number 2. Now we go to the scenario number 3. All right, scenario number 3. What you can tell about this? Can you guess? All right. For the one who's already understand what we are talking about, understand the concept of power, then you could realize that you could immediately see that either it has potential to go up or not. Right? You can see that the demand line for number 1, and supply line number 1, and demand line number 2 and supply line number 2. What we can see here is that, all right, given that the demand line start from this point up to this point, and the supply line comes to the origin point of demand line number 1. But for the second loop, all right, we could see that the seller is just small. All right, there is only small seller, and we make a small retracement downward. All right, or correction downward. Then we can see that obviously that the buyer are dominating the marketplace. All right, it's not normal dominating, but rather it's really buyer dominance, or buyer become aggressive in this line. All right, compared to it retracement, because the most people want to own this stock, and less people want to let go of this equity or stocks. All right, that has resulted that the stocks has potential to go up in the future. All right, this is the beauty of supply and demand, if you understand, because it's easy to see supply and demand. All right, and if it has power, it has potential to go higher than previous high. Right, for this case number 3 is that it has power to go up. All right, now we go to the analysis of number 4. All right, number 4. See the number 4. Right, you see that now. Can anyone tell me either this have power or not? All right, now you can see that the demand line for number 1 and supply line number 1, demand line number 2 and supply line number 2. Right, now we can see that the demand, the same situation goes to loop number 1. All right, where the supply line goes up back to the origin point of the demand line. So we could say that at this what would happen here is that the buyer and seller is the same. Alright, the buyer and seller is quite equal and balanced. But for the second loop, alright, we could see that the buyer is although it takes time for the buyer to reach at this point, this is not a good indication, but we talk about it later about time component. Actually, when we talk about power analysis, this has power to move up because of, if we compare the demand line to the seller, we could say that this buyer are more aggressive than the seller. Alright, and hence after it try to retrace back, it has high chance to go higher than previous high. Alright, because it has power. Now we move to the fifth scenario, where we analyze the fifth scenario, which is, so far all are the example of a two loop having power. Now we go to the fifth example. Right, now we could see that the demand line, this is the supply line, this is demand line, and this is supply line. Right, what we could see that the demand line goes up to this level and retrace. Alright, and obviously that this line is buyer dominated, and as a result it goes up, but then it goes down again, and we could see that the seller are dominated because it's longer than the demand line number 2. Alright, so the progression is from buyer dominating to seller dominating. Alright, and this has resulted that in our power analysis that we can conclude that these two loops does not have power. Right, that's mean if it retrace, alright, when it retrace upward, rebound, it does not have capability to go up. Alright, it might retrace until this price point and go resume its movement upward. Right, now we go to the sample number 5. Right, go to the example number 5. Either it has power or not. We want to determine either it has power or not. Alright, so can anybody share their what their opinion of either this loop has power or not? What you can see here is that this first demand line and supply line, and this is second demand line and supply line. What you can see for loop number 1, it goes back again to the original point of demand line number 1. But again, when demand line commences upward, it goes up to this point higher than previous demand line, but does not concern us about either it's higher or less than previous demand line. For what we are interested is that the consequence line, which is the seller and until when it retrace. Alright, now we can see that the seller line number 2 retrace beyond the support level of this line, so alright, so we can conclude that this line, alright, the seller become more aggressive compared to the seller from the first loop. Alright, for the first loop. Now, although we can see that the demand has become higher, but we doesn't not interested in that. We does not interested in either the demand or seller become more aggressive or less aggressive, although it can help us in determining which one is more power, but rather we want to see we want to compare the current loop with previous loop. Alright, now the seller become more aggressive compared to the first loop, which is from what we can see is that from the first loop it is balanced between buyer and seller, but for the second loop the seller become more aggressive. Then we could see that, and we can conclude that this second loop does not have power to move up, right? Does not have power to move up. What we mean by does not have power to move up is that it does not has power to move up beyond here, right? Beyond previous high, right? When it reach the support level, it may be going back again, right? Going back to the downside, right? I think enough for that example. I hope you guys understand and you are able to do analyze power analysis correctly, because this is our first priority and it is very powerful and quite accurate, and it helps you in reading the chart effectively. How does it help me in determining either the next trend gonna go up or the next trend have chance to go up or not? All right, in the next session we will go to an analysis of we will see on the real charts on power analysis. All right.